And welcome everybody to this week's Punch List brought to you by nerdsonearth.com. I'm Abram. I'm joined here with my good buddies Clave and Jaws, and today we are talking all about WandaVision that just wrapped up this past weekend, this past Friday. The last episode of the series dropped.
Never heard of it.
And yeah, we wanted to bring in a fresh voice. So Clave he doesn't even know what a comic book is, let alone a show based on a comic book run. So how are you? First of all, how are you guys doing, Clave?
Great. Ready to talk about WandaVision.
Jaws?
Yeah, I'm excited tonight. Excited to not have to get up at 4 a.m. to write our recap and review. I get a week off. So pretty excited.
Yeah, it's
You're not going to recap the recap show?
Yeah, I think we're gonna need you to wake up early
because there is a
Friday.
clip show this coming Friday.
Oh, that's right.
I think we'll let that one go. before Falcon and Winter Soldier hit us. So
yes, Falcon and Winter Soldier, of course, coming next Friday. What is that going to be? It's not the 15th. I don't know. Dates are hard.
Second, I think.
The 19th.
The 19th. Falcon and Winter Soldier. So if you guys look at what's coming down the pipeline, the MCU is going to have basically nonstop something every week for us for the foreseeable future.
So loaded.
It's awesome.
Well, and man, can we talk about like what that in and of itself is so interesting is in a world where almost everything gets dropped, here's a whole series. Disney on purpose is saying, no, we're going to create buzz and do this weekly thing. I mean, I usually judge this by like how do my non-nerd friends talk about things, like if it's in the cultural, out there. Like WandaVision would by far, I think, has had the most buzz, honestly, since maybe Lost.
Yeah,
among my my non-nerdy comic book friends. So I think that alone says a lot, and it's an interesting that they've chosen that, right? They've said this is how we're going to do it. And I think it's smart, right? Because if by some chance they had dumped all 9 of those episodes, there's no way that like a month and a half later anybody's talking about it.
Right.
Versus the slow build. Now it creates some complications, which I'm sure we could talk about a little bit too. But
can I talk about one of those complications? Yeah.
Sure.
As an addendum to what you said, is I've seen online. First of all, I don't know that the internet's been a net positive for humanity. The jury's out because the goofy stuff you find on the internet. So on the internet, I'm seeing all these like ranking the 9 episodes of WandaVision. I'm like, we're not doing that. It's one story, people, and you need to remember what television is. And so to your point, that weekly drop has been so good. But then I think the downside is nerds, nerds are prone to losing their minds. And so you have a lot of this like ranking the 9 episodes, and I'm like, it's one story.
Yeah, and we tend to let our imaginations run wild when it's like, everything is already done. They're not changing anything based on what we're thinking or theories that we're putting out there. It's done.
Release the Kevin Feige cut.
Right. Yeah. Which it's coming in at least probably. I don't know. Probably 10 years down the road, we'll get that cut. If all goes well, we got to start an internet movement and get some signatures going for the real cut. Yeah. So I went back and I took a gander down memory lane. I went and looked and listened, watched our preview that we did, our preview video, just to see.
I like where this is going.
See what sorts of hot hits and hot theories actually panned out. So I got a list in front of me.
So tell us where we're wrong.
We're wrong on quite a bit of things. I will say we're pretty wrong on a lot of things, but You guys nailed. Between the two of you, you nailed so much of the show and what was going to come through. Jaws, I have you noted as the first one mentioning them having kids and the kids coming out as part of the story. I think Clave alluded to it. He didn't want to talk about it. Possibly, he said, "I don't want to spoil anything," but I think he alluded to it a little bit. So point for Jaws there. Clave, you were the first to mention House of M reference, and Jaws, you were the one who proposed the reverse House of M. So we spent a lot of time theorizing about the getting rid of all the mutants except for what the top 198, I think it was. So that didn't necessarily happen. However, building off that, you guys did talk about bringing in potentially the X-Men, and we spent a lot of time talking about X-Men coming in, which is a partial point in the sense of Quicksilver. So you get partial credit for that. But Clave, I have you down as you mentioned nosy neighbor, the phrase nosy neighbor so many times that one might wonder if you are the nosy neighbor. But
It's
since
true.
that phrase is, it's so much of the show,
This is
in
the dark hold
hindsight.
right here.
Yeah. So your emphasis on that was very important. And then I think you guys both combined had you were talking about rebuilding Vision, and we were talking about it from the standpoint that Wanda was how did she rebuild it and things like that. However, with the introduction of White Vision, I think we sort of got it. And Clave had referenced Coast Avengers, where White Vision's from. So points there. So I mean, overall, I think we got quite a bit. The only thing we didn't get was obviously a Robert Downey Jr. flashback. Clave was clamoring for that.
That would have been great.
That would have been great. But all in all, I mean, I think you guys were very much on the ball about a lot of what went on. So kudos, big kudos.
Thanks.
Yeah, but I mean,
We're
even
awesome.
in the midst of that, gosh, so many great surprises, right? So many
Mhm.
things that even when you really know the comics that were like, oh, that's a nice twist, or that's a nice change up, or I mean, the first half of the season and the television setups of every episode, just so good, and it allowed them to really kind of build out characters. I mean, it's really interesting to think about. If you really sat down and mapped out the amount of screen time Wanda and Vision have had in the movies, it's not a lot. Yet they came in to build this whole television show all around them. So one of the things they had to do was kind of build up those characters. And by using that TV format, that let them do that. It let them kind of go to people are really invested, Like Clave, I know you've talked about the women in your household really
Love
loving
it.
the show and the story about what's happening with Wanda, and that's because they built that into the show early on, and I just think that was so smart and just so well done. I mean, those early episodes are fantastic tributes to TV, and you can't fake that. Like they did it so well,
Nailed it.
and I think that's one of the things. It almost was like they were saying to the audience, "You just got to hang on. If you can just ride this with us, we're going to get you somewhere that's good." And and, I think they did a great job with that.
Yeah, I want to say two things. One is you mentioned the movies. I always think of this one scene from the movies, which when they were talking about their relationship, remember that? And Vision was stammering around, and finally they were like, "It works," just talking about it works. Remember that scene talking about, and that's kind of my phrase for all of WandaVision. It works. Like when you think about it as a whole story, they just did incredibly well. I just picked up my daughter at school. So to your point about my family, they loved it. And so she was talking about, she goes, "Dad, I just love that." And we watched The Mandalorian together, and we love that. And she goes, "I like it 100 times more than even The Mandalorian." And just to see how excited they are about it, which I think is also interesting, because in Discord, which is where all of us nerds talk, we just drive ourselves crazy with oh, did it do this? Did it do this? And nitpick plot points. And so that's our, as nerds, like that's our first inclination, is we're going to go in and nitpick a plot point, right? And so the folks in my house, they could care less. You know, they were all just talking about the emotion of it and the character relationships and all those sorts. And they weren't worrying that it didn't match up, you know, West Coast Avengers number 59, that which we do, because you know Jaws and I are like, oh my gosh, it's Ghost Vision from West Coast Avenger or whatever. And so it was just a delight to watch it through their lens. So the first thing is it works. And then the other thing is just that how all those emotional beats just played so well and gave it such an incredibly broad audience.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to sort of piggyback off both of those, the thing I really liked about it is, we never got a, Scarlet Witch movie, right? We never got a Vision. You could say Age of Ultron was really Vision's kind of movie, but we didn't get that. We never got that for Wanda. And so how that gradually came out, and then they, that whole episode towards the end where she's sort of going through with Agatha, going through these different points in her past, and you can really see like how how that shaped who she was as a person. But you get that origin feel to be like, this is who Wanda is, this is where she came from, and now you can understand how she deals with emotion, and how she really hangs on to connections that she has. She have connections with a whole lot of people, and so to have connection this strong with someone else, it being Vision, you can relate to her in the sense that you know why she wants to hang on to that, because like that's the thing that she has. And so, I mean, I don't know. It was just really, really great. I love that.
It was a show about grief that just happened to have superheroes in it.
Yeah. I agree with
Well,
that.
and the big villain's grief. The big, that's the thing. I mean, I love the scene at the end where Monica's looking at her and goes, "I don't blame you. Like, if I could bring my mom back, I would." That's reality for a lot of us. Like, the pain we really feel. Like, if you had the kind of power she has and has access to, like, there's no telling. And I think that's what's, to me, is really interesting. Like, Agatha thing is great and fun, and man, that character is really good. And like, I think they're really smart in setting up that she'll be back in some capacity somewhere. Like maybe even as early as the Loki show. I don't know, but I just I think the whole reality really is her pain and how she's dealing with all of that. And I think that's a powerful thing for us to think about. That how do we deal with the pain we face? How do we struggle? Because it impacts all of us.
And in a sense, at the end there, when Agatha was sort of releasing the hold on all of those people, and they're telling her, we can feel your pain. Like, imagine, it's not like you're multiplying pain. Her pain was that great that it spread that intensely, through all of the people where they could feel it. And I thought they did a really interesting job with, as one was leaving, making it so it's like, she's not the good guy. She's not the bad guy even, but she's like a person, and she was driven by this pain that was inside of her. And it's like, based on how much there was, like, you can't blame her. You can't be like, well, it's okay that she did that, but like, you can understand like why that happened and why the people feel, they weren't like, it was very different from a lot of other MCU movies where it's like, hey, the heroes, sick day or whatever. They're all just like, what, like, why us? You pulled us into this story for you, but you also caused all this pain for all of us. I thought it was really interesting that it wasn't this like heroic ending that you kind of come to expect from a lot of the MCU properties.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, gosh, that ending. I mean, she's not Cat, right? She's not. She's done some at this point. She's done a pretty awful thing, and now it's having to reconcile to deal with that. So I do think that it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out. She went to the obligatory cabin in the woods that now is famous in so many Marvel movies.
Yeah, well, but
the Canadian Rockies.
That cab. I didn't see that as the Canadian Rockies. I saw that as Wandalore Mountain, which is in the comics was the setting of her origin story. In the comics, this would have been what, like Avengers 170 or something. Yeah, I can't remember the number, but it was a little 3 or 4 stretch in the comics, and it was weird, man. It was weird. It was like the high evolutionary, like merged this human and the cow, and there was the midwife was cow woman, and then there was like Modron, but all that to point the Darkhold was at the center of that, like who's going to have possession of the Darkhold, and again it was in Sokovia in the MCU in the comics. Again, it was weird and convoluted. The MCU did a much better Wanda origin story. It was cleaner. It was more understandable. It was overall much better than in the comics. But I saw that cabin in front of the mountain as a nod to that origin story, and the Darkhold, because the Darkhold was a huge part of that origin story that was then extended into an adjacent storyline in Doctor Strange, where Doctor Strange battled Dracula, of all people. That might be a tie-in to Blade in the MCU. Who knows? The threads that go through. So if the Darkhold goes there and Dracula. So anyway, there's a graphic novel called The Rise of the Darkhold. It's like 500 pages that collects a lot of 70s comics, including that Wanda origin story, Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, essentially all the appearances of Darkhold. So I suspect there are some breadcrumbs in there for what we'll see in Doctor Strange. And here's my big theory, Abram, for when we come back to that. So in the MCU, the MacGuffin, the item, right, was the Infinity Gauntlet. So I mean that would just sprinkle in through movies and culmination. What if the new MacGuffin is the Darkhold? And so this book shows up in Blade, shows up in Doctor Strange, if only just a reference, and then at some point someone gets the Darkhold, and that's the like big bad item. So we'll see.
Clave, I love that, and I would love to give you credit, but we have to credit AJ, who's watching the stream right now. He, a minute before you started talking, said Darkhold, the new Infinity Gauntlet. For sure, beat you right to it.
Man, I was so close. I was so close. Darn it. Good job, AJ.
And if you believe, right? So you believe that in the MCU, everything on purpose, right? They're not just doing things to do it. It's interesting to go back and look at like episode 7, 8, 9, where we get to see different color magics that start to line up to the different stones in the gauntlet, right?
Yeah.
Like if this purple, Scarlet Witch is red, the Darkhold has an orange glow, Vision's got the yellow left over from the Mind Stone. I mean, it's interesting to think of what they're starting to maybe play with those threads again a little bit. So,
can I go on another? Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I want to go on another. So Jaws mentioned that they do everything on purpose, and so there was one instance where I'm like, well, maybe they didn't do it on purpose, and that was this guy right here, and so like who is the engineer, right? And so there were two big things. Who was the engineer and fake Pietro. So for who is the engineer, I thought, I don't know, like maybe it was a throwaway line. Like I know a guy, like it's just a line. And I never saw where Marvel did this like big, huge marketing thing. Like, find out next week, the stunning identity of the engineer. So I didn't see that Marvel did that. I thought maybe it was a throwaway line, but it turned out they confirmed that was intentional, and so it was a red herring. It was the entire time it was a red herring. The other thing that was a red herring was Pietro, and the reason I bring it up is because red herrings used to be a thing that was done all the time. They are an intentional literary device. We're going to get them off the scent, right? In the age of the internet, us nerds, we freak out. And so it's almost like unrealistic expectations are like premeditated resentments. Like we were just ready to find something to be angry about because it didn't match our headcanon, what we made up. But Pietro was a super interesting case, and I think brilliant in the way they do it, because in the rules of the hex, right, new people couldn't come in unless they were magical or whatever. And so the body of her dead brother couldn't come in the hex and be, because it breaks the rules of the hex as written in the imaginary superhero show that we were watching. What are rules anyway? But according to the rules, you couldn't have her dead brother. Plus, like, she would see him, and Agatha even mentioned that. She was like, you were so distraught, you didn't even notice he didn't look like your brother, And so what was interesting is it had to be someone in the hex, which is, the goofy boner dude, that was already living in the hex. So Agatha had to have, a meat puppet inside. But for us viewers, we were able to recognize, like, we were able to make a connection. Even though it was, and our connection, we immediately jumped to multiverse. But, in terms of viewing, that connection was just like somebody that would recognize, rather than get some random actor, that could have been anyone. And then, Agatha addressed that in the show with Scarlet Witch, saying, you were so distraught, So I thought it was really neat how Marvel played by the rules as written, but then they kind of got this like super tease, as a red herring. And, we're so mad it's not the multiverse after all. It's just some boner. But then, it was actually a pretty clever use of those actors, I thought, to bring it out. So it's, it's controversial, and I could, whatever. I was like, oh, it would have been really fun if it would have been, a multiversal whatever. But it was just, Agatha needed a meat puppet that was already in the hex, and the writers needed someone recognizable for the viewers to not just be like, who's that random dude?
And the writers gave me, maybe it still might be my favorite line of the whole series, was when Darcy said, "Wait, they recast Pietro?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I just love that, because that's a whole nother conversation, how, Darcy and Jimmy Woo, how they were us, right? They were watching the show the whole time.
Yeah.
And their chemistry was so good. And even with Monica, when they three were just this team together, sort of out on their own, trying to, beat the system and figure things out for themselves. It was just really fun that once they started, bringing in the actual, show behind the show, to be in their shoes and like react as they're reacting, and like, I had the same reaction. I'm one of them. I'm on TV.
And two
really cool.
major red herrings, and I think the lesson we learned is us nerds do not like red herrings. we get frustrated and write articles about it on the internet. We tweet about it.
Yeah.
And not to say that there's not some dangling threads that they left at the end of this show. So, I think it's really interesting that the last episode was called series finale. Like, they've sort of called their shot. This is a one and done.
Yeah,
obviously
not season finale, series finale.
Yeah, series finale. They left some things out there that, you still kind of want to know. So my questions is, this whole thing got started because Jimmy Woo had to go to Westview essentially to check on someone. Right. Well, and if it's like his relationship with Scott Lang, the Ant-Man, he like the probation offer for somebody that had powers inside Westview, and like,
dude, that's so stupid. Like? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that's interesting.
I just want more Darcy and Jimmy Woo.
Listen, if somebody's not starting to pitch a sword series that has that trio, throw in a few other mixes, like, I think that would be really. If I have a quibble with the finale, it's that I just didn't have enough time to do something with the trio. in the way that I would have wished for. So,
I mean, she's still got
um,
that funnel cake truck, and she's they can use that sort of as their mobile base of operations. And
you go
I'm
the
in.
I'm here
funnel.
for
I'm
it.
in. Yeah. Yeah, it was so good. That little buddy cop thing they had, I thought was really good, and I'm certainly rooting for more Jimmy Woo to show up in other shows, and if not the
Yeah,
movies, then certainly more Disney Plus.
yeah, it's a lot of potential there for sure. I think so. We didn't talk about one of the big fights in the finale, which is the Vision versus Vision fight. Um, which man was epically done. Like both in terms of like they're flying all across the sky and all that part, but then when they get into that library, like you almost wanted to like say to them like, no, this is not how we resolve superhero fights. We don't think about it and talk about it and
Yeah,
share what we know. I thought it
Vision's
was
just the
so well
best.
done.
Yeah.
Um, so smart of conjured Vision to go. So which one of us is real? You know,
Mm.
we've got this part and you've got that part, and like how do we reconcile all that? It does sort of foreshadow that that's not going to be the last time we ever see Ghost Vision,
Oh, for
because
sure.
one of the things that happens in the comics numerous times is Vision will get the memories but not the emotions. Right?
Mhm.
They'll reboot him essentially, but they can't fake the emotional part. So suddenly he has all these memories of what happened to him. He's not necessarily going to have that emotional tie to Wanda in the way that the first Vision did. And I think there's a lot of interesting there. I don't think it's flew off for a reason, and I
Right.
think we'll see him again.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm looking forward to that. If Wanda and the new Ghost Vision like meet up, what is that going to be like? Because I mean, presumably, if he has just the memories, none of the emotion, like he's still going to see everything that they went through. Like, can emotion come from just memory? But yeah, you're right. I mean, that whole thing with, I mean, give me twice as much Paul Bettany, and I'm a happy camper. But the whole ship of Theseus thing, it's just like, man, you're getting me
So
thinking in a
so well
a
done.
final
Yeah.
battle. You're really churning my gears. I'm like, I don't know. You're bringing up some great points, Vision, and you're supposed to be way, way, way smarter than a normal human person. So, you
Yeah.
tell me.
And I can't imagine for acting awards that these type of things never really get attention. But Elizabeth Olsen for leading actress in
yeah,
a television show, I mean, come on, we have to talk about that supporting actress. We have to talk about um, Catherine Hahn and just her, big, broad facial expressions and the big winks.
yeah.
And then Paul Bettany for best supporting actor and just the sweetness that he brought to the role. It was just so good across the board. Such good stuff.
Well, and I'll tell you, man, they got me when Vision cried. It's one of those things that I should have seen coming a mile away.
Famous comic book
Watching
panel.
him stand there, yes, watching him stand there over the kids, and that was tough to think about. And to know, like he knows, I can't go on forever. It's not right, but it doesn't change the emotion he was feeling. Those for whatever
Mhm.
reason are his kids, and
I know.
how
I
does
mean,
that?
they created that "I love you 3000" moment too, where Wanda's just like,
Mm,
"Thanks for letting me be your mom." It's just like, oh, you just got me. Like the whole closing scene there, and then he turns on the light, and it's just like, wow. I'm starting to tear up a little bit now just talking about it, just thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it
It was
was
really
so
good.
she was really specific. Thanks for choosing me to be your mom. I don't know. There's something about the way she said that made me go. There's something more there. We're gonna see. And then when you get to the end credit, maybe there is. Maybe there is gonna be something.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you guys think about the whole scroll thing there at the end?
Yeah, I think Monica's going to become Spectrum. I don't think it'll be Photon. I think her mom was Photon,
Yeah.
and Monica Rambeau has had what, Jaws, 4 different code names in the comics. I think she'll fit with Spectrum.
Yeah.
And she can see everything in the ultra, whatever physics, the ultraviolet rays or lights or spectrum, right? And so I think we'll see her next in Captain Marvel 2. That would be my guess. That's what up there meant, was that she's going to be with Carol Danvers.
Yeah, which I think we should know would roll into. They've talked about Secret Invasion, kind of coming down the line in the MCU
now, is that
world.
before Captain Marvel 2? I can't remember the timeline on that.
I don't think it is.
I think it's after.
Okay, so then my guess would still be Captain Marvel 2, then Secret Invasion.
I think they've said the least about it because they're still working it out. I think it's going to be really interesting because if you go way back to the Kree Skrull War stuff in the comics sort of lean towards the Kree being the good guys and Skrulls being the bad guys. And they've kind of flipped that a little bit thus far in the MCU. So I'm curious to see.
Which was excellent, the way they did that in Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
excellent.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So now you've got this idea of like the Skrulls are out there looking for a home. And, you know, appealing to Monica, and we assume Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel. Like, I think there's a lot to mine there still. I think, yeah, for sure. I think it'll be curious to see how they do Secret Invasion, because in the comics, very much like a Skrull bloodbath.
Yeah,
people start finding out who it was and wasn't replaced and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was entirely an act of aggression, which they did not set up in the MCU.
Yeah.
So it could be a splinter faction of the Skrulls. I don't know.
Or you know, an overaggressive agency like Sword or somebody like that outing them.
Speaking of Sword, Hayward is the most villainous villain in the MCU.
Gosh.
To fire a gun at children. I'm like,
dude,
you're a bad guy. You need to be in jail forever.
Well, like, and I tried really hard to give him a little bit of like, if you lived what he lived, you could understand. Yeah, but then he shot at two little kids.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden that last episode,
all that goodwill's done.
Yeah, no, man, unacceptable. What are you doing? What is he even doing?
Yeah, like what's up with you? The second after credit scene again, I saw that as a cabin in front of the Wonderlord Mountain. You know, the astral projection. You know, she's learning the Doctor Strange tricks. My takeaway when I first heard it, and who knows? Like, I'm just guessing. When she heard her children's voice, my takeaway is that her astral form found something in the Darkhold about bringing her children forward, and that was the whole, like, it's on. Like, I found something.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how they, I loved how they shot that, right? They set up the scene with her just sitting outside. You're like, you know, she needs some time to sort through everything and just step away from the world. And while you're still thinking that, you're like, oh, she's not. She is going full in on everything. She is going to find and become, the most powerful person, because if that can bring your family back, she tried one thing sort of semi-accidentally, but now she's going to do it. She's going to really try for it. So how is that going to change who she is? She's becoming less of a hero every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and how will Strange interact with her, right? Like, essentially, so if you look at the Avengers movies, they basically don't know each other,
right.
Other than, we were both at the Thanos thing, but
right.
Otherwise they don't really know each other. So
I think there's no relationship.
See how that plays out, given she's got this title now, the Scarlet Witch, that I thought that was genius by Marvel to kind of imbue that title more than just her name, her character name, but like give it some teeth and some extra dimension. So I think that's interesting.
It was a legend rather than a code name.
And I wrote down too the what does Agatha say about the like 4 things that she says that Scarlet Witch will be responsible for. So the Scarlet Witch is not born; she's forged. She does not need a coven or need for incantations. Her power exceeds that of the Sorcerer Supreme, which right now is Doctor Strange. She is destined to destroy the world.
Destined to destroy the world.
That's a big one right there. Just tack it on at the end. They're like, should we mention this?
Putting
Yeah, we
that one
probably
on
should.
top. So,
Yeah.
but I do like that idea that she's access to magic or maybe even magic itself, but it's just raw.
Mhm.
She's still gonna have to learn how to deal with it and sort it. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, the lid is off of Wanda now. Like she's up to this point, she's been capped, and people have always said she's so powerful, and we see glimpses of it throughout all the other MCU stuff, but like you never really feel that she's like on par or better than half of the other heroes. But now you can start to see that the gloves are off, and she is really somebody that you don't want to get on her bad side. I mean, you don't want to get on her bad side in the Hex, but you definitely don't want to get on her bad side in the so-called real world either.
What a slate. What a slate coming up. All the movies, all the shows, and like if this is the first Disney Plus show, like I don't know where we go from here. All I know is that the director Matt Schackerberg, he did quality work. I hope he gets more work. And the writer producer, her name is Jack something, JAC. I'm like, they gotta loop her in for another project. It was just well done by all the creators. It worked.
They worked.
And to do it in the Marvel, the sad reality is we've seen some directors can't do that. Right? Like, when they've lost directors on key projects and stuff. So, you got to be able to play ball their way, and to do that and still make great art that speaks to the hearts of people it's just tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous achievement by everybody involved.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to Falcon and Winter Soldier next Friday. You can probably expect to see some recap articles every week coming out from Nerds on Earth, because if you want to go back, if you ever feel like watching WandaVision again, which I certainly will, it was really nice to be able to read those after the fact and sort of fill myself in on a lot of the sort of comic angles that I personally miss, because I haven't read as many comics as you gurus. But yeah, so definitely looking forward to that. We are on the MCU ride now. We are on the ride for months. So you guys better buckle up.
Next Monday, are the three of us going to make our guesses on Falcon and Winter Soldier? Because I got fan theories.
I think we could arrange that. I think we can arrange that. I'll put it on the books. We'll talk pre-Falcon Winter Soldier next Monday via the punch list, week of the first episode. And then, in weeks after that, we'll go through and I'll say how wrong we were again.
Totally.
As is tradition.
Not ashamed to own our mistakes and failures.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, as always, this has been a pleasure. Thank you, Clay. Thank you, Jaws, for talking WandaVision. We have high hopes for future MCU projects coming down the pipeline. And thanks for tuning in, nerds, for joining this conversation with us. Shout out to AJ, who was with us this whole time. Thanks, AJ.
Hey.
AJ's not my favorite. He beat me by 1 minute.
He doesn't mean that, AJ. Maybe secretly he does. All right. Well, nerds, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Take it easy, nerds. Thanks a lot.